idea? Oh, wait. Oh, is that better? Should we put them bigger? More? Okay. Won't be long. Is that better? That's the biggest I can do. Yeah? Well, I invite people who need the captions, maybe there's reserved seating in the front if you need to move up. That would be a good idea. Okay. Thank you. Yes, of course.
I'll just repeat that. Catherine was just saying if you need the live captions, we just invite you to move closer if that would be helpful, just because this is the largest font size we can do. Okay, I think we're just about ready to start, and it's 6 o'clock on the dot, so I'm feeling particularly proud and excited that we're here, ready to go on time. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited. So good evening and welcome to the celebration and keynote for the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. My name is Shanice Yard, and I am a member of the equity team in the Office of the Provost and Executive Vice President Academic, and also the organizing committee for this event this evening. So thank you so much for joining us also for a historic event. This is McGill's first ever official celebration of the International Day. Just a moment. Do you need to make adjustments there? We're good.
Captions are not appearing on screen, I think because we're in, so you might need to adjust something this side.
Okay. I'm just going to ask my dear colleague Andy for a little tech support. Oh, we're good. We are good. Wonderful. Okay, let's try that again. Andy, could you come? We're gonna just try and figure out this. This is what happens when we're ready to go at 6, and there's a little bit of a delay, so thank you for your patience. Okay, looks like we're good. Thank you so much. So I'm going to just say that again because we're making history. So thank you for joining us for this historic event, McGill's first ever official celebration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. So it's a pretty big deal. Thank you so much for being here. This evening's event is organized by the equity team in partnership with the Faculty of Law. So special thanks to the Faculty of Law and Dean Robert Leckie for their support, which is incredibly fitting considering Dr. Laverne Jacobs, our keynote speaker this evening, is an alumna of the Faculty of Law, so we always love to welcome people back to McGill. We hope you enjoyed the reception and the delicious food. Thank you as always to Chef Sean, who I feel like is McGill's kind of official caterer now, not fully official, but we love his food, so thank you for preparing this food for us. And to everyone behind the scenes who made it and make it possible for us to gather, whether it's coordinating the logistics, supporting with comms, shout out to Sylvie, setting up the space, cleaning up the rooms, taking care of the babies, and ensuring that everything runs as smoothly as possible. So thank you for that labor. A few important details to share for this evening. So please put your phones on silent if you haven't already, just to avoid any noise disruptions. Note that there are accessible and gendered washrooms on this floor, and gender-inclusive washrooms are located on the second and the fourth floor of the building. Our photographer for the evening, Kamara Limon, will be taking photos, thank you. And we'll be sure to not include anyone who is wearing a blue sticker that we would have gotten at the registration table. We also have our wonderful ASL interpreters here on the floor and our log captioner behind them to support communication. A reminder to please, especially when we open up the Q&A period, but also for all of our guest speakers, just to be mindful of not speaking too quickly. That way everything can be accurately captured. And an accommodation-related request that we have for this evening that we received is for us to try to use the deaf applause as opposed to clapping with the palm of our hands. And so I'll demonstrate what that looks like, and then I'll invite everybody to try. Wonderful, thank you so much. So we'll practice that because we'll have several people coming up to speak, and then you'll get to practice that applause each time. So to begin, I am honored to introduce and welcome the esteemed Elder Michael Loft, who is here with us to do the opening for this evening's event. Elder Loft, born and raised in Kahnawake, is well known here at McGill and has been instrumental in the advancing of important initiatives, including Indigenous Access McGill and the School of Social Work, the moving of the Hochstetter Rock, and the Provost Task Force on Indigenous Studies and Indigenous Education. So please join me in welcoming Elder Michael Loft.
That means I'm a member of the Minnetonka people that live right across the river, I'm happy to open the proceedings with our Thanksgiving address, or the words that come before all else. I begin by acknowledging the Kanyankahara people, the Mohawk people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today. I pay my respect to the elders, past and present. I also extend that same respect to all people gathered here today. The Thanksgiving address, or the words that come before all else, is called the Ohonto Kairu Ekwa in our language. It's not a prayer although it sounds like a prayer, but it's an expression of gratitude, okay, and our links to all of creation. The Iroquois, which goes from here all the way to Buffalo, New York, and beyond. Iroquois, each day someone honors the Creator with this prayer, or not this prayer, but these words. Not just on the official Canadian American Thanksgiving Day, because we give thanks every day. And we do that because it's basically, it's something that we have to do. They always tell us the day that this Ahandagadekwa is not said, is the day that the world will end. That's what they say. That's the way I was told when it's coming up. So it's all about respect. We have to respect what we have. So I will share the words today in English, but sadly, these words will pale in comparison to the vibrancy and the evocative images within our beautiful Kanyankea Mohawk language. I stand with a humble heart as I share, or I sit with a humble heart as I share what I can today. The Ahandagadekwa are words that come before us express our people's gratitude to the various elements of the natural world, and is recited always before meetings in the Iroquois world, gatherings, etc., to show our respect. Nothing else matters unless you touch base first. Okay. I can still hear the elders from my childhood stressing how important it is for us all to show respect between ourselves and all living things and elements. They would always say respect is everything. As you know, because without respect we have nothing as human beings. That differentiates us from everything else. And as a Oklahoma or human beings, as I said, there's nothing without basic respect. The Ahandagadekwa helps us in this way to appreciate the interconnectedness of life and the teachings each element gives. It reminds us of our responsibility as Oklahoma, as human beings, Oklahomans, human beings, to live in harmony with each other in all of creation. So now we bring our minds together as one, as we acknowledge each other today. We are thankful to Mother Earth, our Mother, the Earth, expressing gratitude for the sustenance and support she has provided throughout time. We give thanks for the waters, recognizing, its crucial role in sustaining life and various forms in nature. Water is sacred. Now we turn our minds to the vast fields of plant life. We appreciate the plant's role in supporting various life forms, medicines, and we have a hopeful outlook for their continued growth. With one mind, we turn to honor all the fruit plants we harvest from the garden. We greatly appreciate the nourishing plants that have sustained life since time immemorial. We gather our minds in gratitude and respect for the animals that provide food, acknowledging their teachings and hope for their continued presence. We now turn our thoughts to the many families of trees, especially the maple tree, for providing food, shelter, and basically the beauty of the maple tree, and their symbolic representation of peace and strength in the world. We put our minds together in gratitude to the birds, for their beautiful songs and the daily reminder to cherish life, and with a special mention of the eagle as their leader. We are all thankful to the powers we know as the four winds, for refreshing and purifying the atmosphere, aiding in seasonal changes, and providing messages and strength from all directions. Now we turn to the west with our grandfathers, the Thunder Beings. This is where they live in the west. With their thundering voices, they bring with them the precious water that renews life. We now send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. We acknowledge his consistent journey across the sky from east to west and his vital role as a source of life's energy. We put our minds together in gratitude to Grandmother Moon for her guidance and influence over the tides, over time, and indeed the cycle of life. We give thanks to the stars, acknowledging their role in illuminating the night and guiding those who travel. We gather our minds in gratitude for the wisdom of the enlightened teachers who have come to help through the ages to guide our people in living harmoniously according to our ancient teachings. Now we turn our thoughts to the great Creator above. In Ganyangeha, we say, Shawaya Islam. Creator, his name is Shawaya Islam. It's the one who made us. And we have another name, Taiyawaha, which means he who holds up the heavens. We express deep appreciation to the Creator of all things for the abundant gifts of life and love that earth offers. Remembering that nature provides all essentials for our fulfilling life. Now our minds are one. We now close these words of gratitude, acknowledging that while not everything may have been mentioned, we invite individuals to extend their own thanks in their own way. Okay. Now, si lo luego, best wishes for a great evening of learning and making connections. Now, go.
Thank you so much, Elder Locke, for those words of welcome, of welcoming, of opening, of thanksgiving, and for modeling what it looks like to really give gratitude. As always, it's imperative for us living here in Tiohtià:ke or Montreal, the city where McGill University is located, a city which is situated on the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka, the people who have stewarded, protected, and cared for this land that carries our bodies and makes life possible. And so we have an obligation to not only reflect, but to act. And we have to understand that colonization, white supremacy, and ableism are all interconnected forces that determines who is considered to have value and who matters. And so working and acting against these systems is a necessary form of resisting that myth, because we all have value. And part of being gathered here today is really to reaffirm that. So thank you so much. At this point, I am so happy to introduce Provost and Executive Vice President Academic, Mr. Benedicti.
Thank you so much, Reese. It's a great honor to be here with all of you today. As you know, International Day for Persons with Disabilities was proclaimed in 1992 by the United Nations General Assembly in Resolution 47/3, and it's been observed annually since. And the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was adopted in 2006 and works to advance the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities. As Shanice said at the outset, this is an historic event at McGill. It is our first celebration of its kind in honor of the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. And this celebration is part of our larger commitment to advancing the work of EDI, and in particular, increasing accessibility for persons with disabilities. Part of that commitment includes the development of the McGill Accessibility Strategy, which recently has been going through consultations with faculty, staff, and students, and was the subject of a university-wide town hall where 150 people joined to consult on the draft and share feedback. And I want to thank everyone who attended that town hall and provided feedback on the strategy. The theme of Disability Pride is an important one that aims to celebrate diversity and center the experiences of people with disabilities, while also challenging the stigma, which is a result of ableism, discrimination, and exclusion. It's necessary for us to reflect on what we are doing individually and institutionally to address barriers in the workplace and in our learning spaces and classrooms so that all members of the McGill community can succeed and thrive. And so it's a great honor for us, for me, to welcome Professor Laverne Jacobs to be with us this evening. Professor Jacobs is the first ever Canadian to be elected to serve on the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which monitors the implementation of the CRPD. Dr. Jacobs, as Shanice said, is an alumna of McGill. He graduated from the McGill Faculty of Law in 1999 and is now a full professor of law at the University of Windsor. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about her tremendous accomplishments from Dean Leckie when he introduces her. And her keynote address is entitled Disability Equality as an Ethical Project of Inclusion. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank a number of other people here. Of course, I'd like to thank Elder Michael Law for his opening words. I've had the pleasure of working with Mike for a number of years on really important issues, and I want to thank him for the way in which he has helped me develop my own views on a number of these issues. So it's wonderful to have Michael here to open the event. I also want to thank the equity team and the Office of the Provost and Executive Vice President Academic, led by Tanya Jarrett, who's the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, for all the work they do generally to advance the university's EDI agenda, but in particular for the work that's been done to organize this event. Catherine Waugh deserves special mention, the Accessibility Advisor, who's played an instrumental role in advancing important efforts relating to accessibility and disability at McGill. The subcommittee on persons with disabilities and its interim chair, Professor Sherry Grotman, plays a very important role. Of course, the Faculty of Law and Dean Leckie for supporting this event. And finally, our great guest, Professor Laverne Jacobs, who you're going to hear a lot more about and learn from in a few moments. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being here, and I wish you a great evening.
Thank you so much, Provost Murray. And with that, I will welcome Tanya Jarrett, who's the Director of EDI and leader of our equity team.
Hi everyone, it's an honor to be here with you tonight. What I hope and imagine will be the beginning of a long tradition of the official marking of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities at McGill, also known as the first annual. I think we're all looking forward to hearing from Professor Laverne Jacobs, who will speak on disability equality as an ethical project of inclusion. I know I am, and I'm so grateful to have her here with us tonight. The amount of planning and coordination that is required to pull off an event like this is mind-boggling, and I want to extend major kudos to the amazing team who worked hard for months to make today possible. I know we've already thanked them once, but I want to just take a minute again to thank them all. The entire team really comes together around this, but I want to in particular acknowledge the work of Antoinette Henry, Lee Zhu, Andy Clegg, Shanice Yard, and of course the lead on this event in Doxer, one and only Catherine Roy. I'm grateful to work amongst and learn from such a talented team of colleagues, and I'm constantly impressed at the work that this group manages to accomplish while working from a place of integrity that centers professionalism and teamwork. So the official theme of the International Day this year on the UN side is amplifying the leadership of persons with disabilities for an inclusive and sustainable future. And as you've heard already, the team at McGill has chosen Disability Pride as our theme and focus for the events this year. Both of these are themes that resonate really strongly with me, and especially when I think about the work ahead of us at McGill. Over the last decade, and especially under the leadership of Provost Manfredi and former Associate Provost, now Deputy Provost Angela Campbell, there's been a shift in how we think about equity, diversity, and inclusion at McGill, a move from understanding it as something peripheral to the daily business of running a university to recognizing it as a core part of what we do, a necessary condition for fostering and strengthening the excellence towards which we strive. A focus on addressing ableism and strengthening accessibility has been part of this work, and we have made advances in that regard, and I'm very proud of that. But while there have long been disabled students, faculty, and staff and their allies engaging in this work at McGill, and while the institution itself has made some advances, we know and acknowledge that at the institutional level, the work in this regard is really just beginning. What's exciting to me is that it feels like we're at the front door of a big potential shift, as if the work to date has gotten us onto the porch, and now we're ready to go inside and see the wondrous and breathtaking understanding and transformation that awaits us when we truly embrace the dismantling of barriers to build an institution where disability cultures can thrive, where disabled students, faculty, and staff are included in the most fulsome sense of the word, and their contributions are recognized and celebrated. What an exciting prospect with such broad-reaching potential to change all of us, and in ways that we can barely just begin to imagine. And of course, nothing about us without us. This work must be done with the leadership and participation of those who are part of disability communities at McGill. I know I'm excited and ready to do the work that is required to bring us to the next stage, and I hope all of you are too, and that you will join me. With that, I wish you a wonderful talk.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Next, really happy to welcome Professor Sherry Botman, who is also the interim chair of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee Subcommittee on Persons with Disabilities.
Merci beaucoup, Shanice. Thank you very much, Shanice. Merci de m'avoir invité à présenter ce soir. Thank you for inviting me to present this evening. Bienvenue à tout le monde. Welcome, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be before you tonight at this important event celebrating the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Events like this one are crucial in that they serve to educate and empower, as well as raise awareness about the significant and enduring stigma and discrimination that mark our lives as disabled people. It also serves as an important reminder about the role the Academy can and must play in redressing historical and contemporary forms of oppression. On behalf of the McGill Joint Senate Board Committee on Equity, Subcommittee on Persons with Disabilities, I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Jacobs for being with us tonight and for teaching us and inspiring us to think critically about the important role of policy and legal advocacy on the local and world stage. The subcommittee has a unique role at the university as it is charged with the objective of sensitizing the McGill community to emerging issues impacting persons with disabilities on campus, and assisting in advising the McGill Board of Governors and the Senate to identify the systemic barriers experienced by persons with disabilities at the university, including ableist policies and practices, and to recommend solutions that respond to and ultimately eliminate them. This is an important year for the university as it sets out to launch the McGill Accessibility Strategy as a key area of policy across all aspects of our institution. We're grateful to all of those who have worked so hard over the past few years to bring the draft policy to life, and particularly thank the many people with disabilities who served on the equity team and the advisory group. Once finalized and ratified by the university, we at the subcommittee hope that the necessary resources to ensure its successful implementation and ongoing evaluation will be put in place in continuing partnership with disabled faculty, staff, and students. I believe strongly that Dr. Jacobs' presentation tonight will inspire McGill and all of us present to keep working to make certain that accommodation is viewed as a first and crucial step towards the larger goal of disability justice at McGill, a goal which can foreground disability pride in all its diversity and facilitate the eradication of intersectional forms of oppression faced by disabled people at every level of university life. For myself personally, and on behalf of the subcommittee, I would like to say thank you for your presence here tonight, Dr. Jacobs, and for all the work you have done on behalf of people with disabilities across Canada and the world.
Thank you so much, Sharon. At this point, I'm really honored to welcome and introduce the Dean of the Faculty of Law, Professor Robert Lucky.
Merci beaucoup. Pour moi, c'est un grand privilège de vous présenter ce soir notre conférencière d'honneur, le professeur Laverne Jacobs. Elle détient 3 diplômes de McGill, BA Honors, obtenu en 1994, un LLB en common law et un BCL en droit civil, tous deux obtenus en 1999. Nous sommes donc ravis qu'elle ait accepté de venir à son alma mater pour participer aux activités de la Journée internationale des personnes en situation de handicap. Depuis son temps à la faculté de droit, l'attention scientifique qui est consacrée aux droits des personnes en situation de handicap a augmenté de façon importante. Les dons généreux du feu l'honorable Jim Hugeson et de la Fondation Grafton rendent possible plusieurs activités, y compris le soutien aux étudiants et étudiantes de notre programme et des stages en droit de la personne. En outre, nous comptons maintenant au moins 3 collègues professoraux dont les recherches portent régulièrement sur ces enjeux cruciaux. Les professeurs Nandini Ramanujam et Jonas Sébastien Baudry, ainsi que le vice-doyen à la recherche, le professeur Sébastien Jodoin. Lorsque j'enseigne le droit constitutionnel, je souligne comment le droit fondamental à l'égalité et d'être libre de toute discrimination fondée sur le handicap met nos engagements à l'épreuve, car ceux auxquels les personnes en situation de handicap ont droit est sans doute l'égalité réelle et non pas formelle. Il s'agit de trouver un traitement différencié qui tienne compte des circonstances spécifiques afin de fournir un accès inclusif et égal. Il est trop facile de se retrancher dans l'égalité formelle en voulant traiter tout le monde de manière identique. Allow me now to share a little more about the distinguished career of our honored guest. Laverne Jacobs is a full professor at the University of Windsor Faculty of Law and a former Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies. Since earlier this year, she has held a research chair in disability, equality, and administrative justice. Professor Jacobs teaches, researches, and writes in the areas of disability rights law, administrative law, human rights law, and administrative justice. She has published and presented widely in her field in Canada and internationally. Her work is characterized by a deep interest in the everyday workings of the administrative justice system and the experiences of those people who use it. Professor Jacobs has held public appointments on boards, committees, and tribunals. Among others, she served on the board of directors of the Income Security Advocacy Centre and the Canadian Institute for the Administration of Justice. The honours conferred on her include the Canadian Bar Association's Touchstone Award in 2021 and the Canadian Association of Law Teachers Academic Excellence Award in 2022. She founded and directs the Law, Disability and Social Change Project, a research and public advocacy centre at Windsor Law that works to foster and develop inclusive communities. And she serves as co-director of the Disability Rights Working Group at Berkeley Law's Centre for Comparative Equality and Anti-Discrimination Law. In June 2022, Professor Jacobs was elected to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This committee monitors the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities by those states that have ratified it. Committee members are independent experts selected from countries around the globe, and Professor Jacobs is the first ever Canadian chosen to serve on this committee, making her election historic for that reason. As you know, the keynote address tonight is entitled Disability Equality as an Ethical Project of Inclusion. Dear colleague, we warmly welcome you and look forward to learning from your insights.
Thank you so much, Dean Lucky. And I'll pass it over to you, Dr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Shanice. Can you hear me? Thank you, Shanice. And thank you, Dean Lucky, for your kind remarks. Thank you. That's good. That's great. Thank you, Shanice, and thank you, Dean Lucky, for the kind remarks. Elder Loft, Provost Manfredi, members of the Provost's office, Dean Lucky, and everyone who is in attendance here today, good evening. Thank you for the very warm welcome and for the generous and kind introductions. I'm grateful to be joining you on the traditional territory of the Kanyan Kahaka, and I'm pleased to spend time with you as a visitor on this land. It's really an absolute honor for me to be here this evening to celebrate International Day of Persons with Disabilities. The day has meaning for all of us, I know, as persons with disabilities and as allies, but I'm particularly delighted to be back at my alma mater and to be invited to speak about my life's journey since I graduated from McGill more than 20 years ago. The path that I have traveled has brought me through some adversity, but has also given me the opportunity to become a much stronger lawyer and scholar and an advocate for persons with disabilities. And I'm very pleased to share what I have learned in order to contribute to our collective pursuit of disability equality and inclusion. The theme of this event, as you know, is disability pride. And I think that this theme ties in quite well with the global rights movement, the global disability rights movement. The theme of this year's International Day of Persons with Disabilities, as we've heard, or IDPD as it's known, is amplifying the leadership of persons with disabilities for an inclusive and sustainable future. This theme aims to recognize the important role that persons with disabilities play in creating a more inclusive and sustainable world for all. It also emphasizes the importance of the participation of persons with disabilities in decision-making processes that affect their lives. Leadership, sustainable inclusion, and participating in decision-making that affects persons with disabilities are all elements of disability equality. There are aspects of disabled lived experience that as a society we should strive to maintain, and for which persons with disabilities and their allies should feel proud. But what I will be discussing today, this evening, in my keynote, is why efforts to achieve disability equality through the law meet with varying levels of success, and how we might improve the situation. To be more specific, there is definitely a rich history of legal decisions and legislative developments that have occurred over the past 50 years. This time frame includes some of the most significant cases in disability rights in Canada, and some of the boldest efforts made by federal, provincial, and municipal governments to ensure the equality of the rights of persons with disabilities. Nevertheless, disabled people continue to face barriers to equality, and I argue that there may be ways to refine approaches in order to improve the prospects for achieving deep and meaningful social inclusion. Moreover, I'm always cognizant of the myriad intersections, or the myriad ways that our identities intersect, and how too often, in the case of persons with disabilities, these intersections result in increased multiple marginalization. And I believe that any avenues taken to improve equality and social inclusion for people with disabilities must therefore not only keep this intersectional component in mind, but ensure that there are viable pathways to incorporate it. In this evening's keynote then, after saying a few words about my own experience of disability by way of introduction, I will look at two socioeconomic contexts, transportation and post-secondary education, where different legal mechanisms have been used to ensure equality rights for persons with disabilities. I'll then move to describing a conceptual approach that I've termed disability equality as an ethical project of inclusion, and explore briefly what this conceptual approach may have to say about advancing disability equality and the ways that it might be done. When I was a student at McGill in the 1990s, I was not a disabled person. I became a wheelchair user later after I had been called to the bar and was completing my PhD. My disability was caused by a spinal cord injury, and as these things go, it changed my world and the way that I would function in the world within a very short space of time. As a legal scholar, I had already been interested in the administrative justice system at the time of my injury. The administrative justice system is the system of tribunals that are at arm's length from government and public-facing governmental programs, such as those that provide benefits. While I had already been researching and writing in this area of law, my new realities prompted me to examine the use of the administrative justice system by persons with disabilities. Indeed, persons with disabilities make up a large percentage of those that use the administrative justice system regularly. This is because disability discrimination claims, issues relating to workplace issues such as accommodation, income security benefits, workers' compensation claims are all issues that, unfortunately, a large proportion of persons with disabilities in Canada face on a daily basis. And these issues, including the resolution of disputes concerning them, are handled by the administrative justice system. I'm happy to share this snapshot with you of who I am and why I'm interested in issues relating to law and disability. In doing so, I don't want to be dramatic or to facilitate engagement in what's called inspiration porn. Inspiration porn refers to inspiring non-disabled persons who feel that they should be able to accomplish the same or even additional goals if a disabled person can accomplish them. The disabled person is therefore used as an inspiration or motivation for the able-bodied. That is not my aim in telling you the personal story that brought me to looking at issues of law and disability. My intention, rather, is to show how personal circumstances can provide a different perspective on the issues that we encounter, and, in the case of academics, issues that we study. After my spinal cord injury, I engaged more frequently with other members of the disability community and began to really recognize some of the structural and systemic barriers that we faced. Sometimes these barriers were faced as a result of disregard for our needs, for example, architectural designs, or absence of quiet spaces, or absence of support for parents with disabilities. But at other times, these disability barriers were compounded as they stemmed from or connected to historical stigma relating to gender, gender identity, race, indigeneity, migration status, or other social identities in addition. My scholarship is always focused on understanding lived experiences in order to improve the law and legal systems. As I became more engaged, even consumed with disability issues, I quickly moved to center these experiences with persons with disabilities into my work as a law professor, concentrating on the moments where persons with disabilities experience inequality while pursuing matters within the administrative justice system, and seeking to improve concepts such as equality, access to justice, and fairness, so that they are better able to speak to and ameliorate the experiences of the disability community. As many of you know, the work of a professor extends beyond research and teaching to service both inside and outside of the university. These opportunities to engage in service to the community usually take the shape of public appointments, engagement with community interest groups, practical work through litigation support, and other forms of support to non-governmental organizations. Over the course of my career, these opportunities offered me the chance to reflect and act through initiatives to improve disability equality and inclusion. These opportunities included being appointed to the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, serving on the board of directors of a poverty law clinic whose primary clients were recipients of income security benefits, disability benefits, and serving on the Ontario Courts Accessibility Committee. Currently, as it has been mentioned, I have the honor of serving on the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This is the human rights treaty body that is responsible for ensuring the implementation of the CRPD around the world. At present, over 190 countries have ratified the convention, making it the second largest human rights treaty after the Convention on the Rights of the Child. My work on the CRPD committee incorporates both a policy-making and adjudicative function. The committee performs both types of function. In its policy-making activities, the committee provides recommendations to countries on implementing disability rights laws and policies, and furthers the definition and development of central concepts relating to disability equality within the convention. In its adjudicative capacity, the committee renders decisions on individual complaints against states parties. The convention itself is a tool with incredible potential. Through its articles, the committee holds countries to report on the work that they have done to fulfill their obligations to persons with disabilities. Our corresponding concluding observations detail specific tasks that the country should complete. The optional protocol to the convention also allows for individuals to bring matters to the committee once they have exhausted all domestic remedies. Finally, a lesser known but very powerful tool of the CRPD's optional protocol is its inquiry function, which can be used to ask the committee to investigate potential systemic violations of the rights of persons with disabilities with follow-up. Organizations of persons with disabilities use the outcomes of the CRPD committee to hold their governments to account and provide shadow reports to the committee at the time of review through constructive dialogue. Having completed the snapshot of my personal story of disability and scholarship, let me turn now to share an overview with you of 2 studies in the socioeconomic areas of transportation and post-secondary education. These 2 studies illustrate not only some of the major challenges faced by persons with disabilities in these contexts, but also the reasons why the tools of adjudication and standard setting are limited in their ability to successfully bring about disability equality and inclusion. From the earliest days, one issue of my disabled lived experience that I found to be personally incredibly frustrating, as well as perplexing, was the lack of reliable and adequate transportation for persons with disabilities. It was a collective issue that I knew affected many in the disability community as well. This led me to conduct a research study looking at how equality law in theory could connect more productively with the rights of persons with disabilities in relation to transportation and better reflect our transportation needs. So let me say a few words then about the study on transportation and human rights. The study reviewed all of the transportation cases before human rights tribunals across the country between 1976 and 2016, a 40-year period. In this study, my research assistants and I identified and focused on cases dealing with allegations of disability discrimination in the provision of transportation services. Human rights tribunal cases were chosen because human rights tribunals are designed to be accessible by self-represented litigants. Many people, therefore, present before human rights tribunals, expressing themselves directly instead of through the filter of the legalized vocabulary of the legal advocate. These cases, therefore, provide a window into what persons with disabilities are seeking, and in their own words. The decisions themselves reveal interesting facts regarding reasons why the cases, and cases in general that use human rights law to pursue equality, have met with limited success. A review of the cases in the study's sample show that the cases fall into 3 major categories. Cases where a person with a disability sought transportation restructuring. The common reason for such a request was in response to demands of advanced booking on specialized transit without any guarantee of securing rides. Cases where transportation was sought to support a broader family dynamic. And the third category of case comprised decisions where there was a concern that a claimant's transportation needs had not been met. The needs could be safety related, etc. In such cases, there was also usually a concern that the transportation needs of the disabled person were not met because of a competing interest on the part of the service provider to preserve the efficiencies and expectations of the mainstream population using the transportation system. When it came to findings of discrimination, the cases were largely unsuccessful. Cases in which individuals sought transportation restructuring were largely met by jurisdictional responses, with the tribunal indicating that it was outside of its authority to engage in legislative reform, or that a reinterpretation, or one could see a reinterpretation in other cases of the arguments to fit within a reasonable accommodation framework. Where transportation was sought to support a broader family dynamic, such as child rearing or by a parent with disabilities, the factual and legal analysis of the information presented often led to interpretations which put those child rearing obligations back within the private family sphere. Finally, in cases where individuals allege that their transportation needs were not met, such as wheelchairs not being tied down, or individuals being placed on a side of the bus where they felt less secure due to the nature of their impairment, several disturbing and often unpredictable results emerged. Evidence to show medical diagnoses as opposed to barriers in travel were common. Questions about the sufficiency of evidence and the medical nature of the evidence also became apparent as important factors within the analysis. Overall, what we learned from the study is that people with disabilities were looking for more than what is offered by the two dominant theories of equality. These dominant theories are proper recognition of individuals in order to preserve human dignity, and a fair distribution of public goods and services to ensure all demographics and populations are taken into account. But the cases in the study showed us that persons with disabilities sought more than simply proper recognition or fair distribution of goods and services. They also were not looking for reasonable accommodation. What they seemed to be looking for was first-order equality. In other words, a system that acknowledged their experiences and the barriers they often and routinely faced within these experiences. They also wanted a system which acknowledged these experiences and barriers from the beginning of the legal analysis determining whether discrimination exists, not at the point of creating reasonable accommodation. They wanted their time to be respected in the same way that the time of mainstream society members was respected in their transportation needs, and that was another point emerging from the study. So how do you address all of these concerns? The concerns are evident from the sample, the concerns that are evident from the sample are not readily or easily picked up within the design of the doctrinal human rights discrimination analysis. But one way that might be helpful is to understand the purpose of the human rights statute as undertaking a project of inclusion. If this idea underlies efforts of statutory interpretation within the anti-discrimination realm, then it may prompt adjudicators to consider the results that they reach in light of this overall goal. So adjudication over transportation inequality by human rights tribunals has therefore not shown us a terrible amount of progress for achieving disability equality and social inclusion. What about education, and particularly post-secondary education? On the UN CRPD committee, I have often asked government delegations from different countries about their plans or mechanisms for addressing barriers for post-secondary students with disabilities. Part of the reason that I do this is because without well-educated disabled students, the leadership roles that we hope persons with disabilities will take up may become a fantasy. Article 24.1 of the CRPD provides a commitment to the full development of human potential and of a student's sense of dignity, self-worth, as well as a commitment to develop the student's personality, talents, and creativity, along with their mental and physical abilities, to their fullest potential. Article 24.5 builds on this commitment by guaranteeing persons with disabilities access to general tertiary or post-secondary education, vocational training, adult education, and lifelong learning, without discrimination and on an equal basis with others. Nevertheless, on the ground, within educational institutions, disabled post-secondary students continue to face barriers to education every day. A few years after the study on transportation, I completed a study that looks at the barriers experienced by post post-secondary students with disabilities in Canada. The two studies are similar in the sense that they both examine human rights tribunal decisions. However, the post-secondary education study examines as well a new post-secondary education standard for persons with disabilities developed in Ontario in 2022. This research forms part of a group of studies asking similar questions about access to post-secondary education for persons with disabilities in a number of countries, including the Netherlands, Ireland, and the United States. With respect to post-secondary education in Canada, three principal barriers emerged from the research and data analysis. And those are up on the screen. They are admissions barriers, barriers to in-program accommodations, and legal barriers. In the case law analyzed during the period studied, admissions barrier decisions primarily dealt with requests for accommodations in the taking of standardized entrance exams, or in the way that admissions criteria were evaluated. One case in the study concerned funding. Decisions about accommodations in standardized entrance exams are newly emerging. However, the cases demonstrate that in some fields, such as law, alternatives to the principal entrance exam are not readily available. This is because of the profession's dominant belief in the accuracy of the comparisons that standardized testing will bring. Because several cases were dismissed at a preliminary stage in the sample that we studied, it's hard to answer some concrete questions about the law's responses to certain situations. For example, it's hard to know at what point a testing center could be successfully challenged for having requested a surplus of the diagnostic assessments, or be deemed to have relied on an incorrect opinion by its experts regarding the sufficiency of an accommodation. Another question, a very relevant one that still remains unanswered, is how exactly to assess material that is replacing traditional grades when a university, is accommodating in the admissions process. Also, when a university faces undue hardship, permitting it to avoid making such replacements, when do those situations arise? So these questions remain unanswered at the moment, although we may soon receive decisions with some guidance on that front. In-program accommodation barriers are the most common type of barrier experienced by students with disabilities in the post-secondary context. This is the second category on this screen. And just briefly, lessons learned from the in-program accommodations barrier cases reveal that it's necessary for students to ask for accommodations at the earliest opportunity. The guidance that's available also emphasizes the importance of students connecting their disability firmly to the supports requested. And these cases demonstrate as well the concern that some students have about safeguarding their privacy and avoiding stigma. But how can a student ensure that requests for accommodations result in supports that are both reasonable and sufficient, and that balance privacy against the consequences of not revealing one's disability? The answers to these questions are neither easily forthcoming from the jurisprudence, nor well known to students. And the final category is legal barriers. Legal barriers prevent students from effectively establishing their cases for reasonable accommodations, as well as from making complaints within the university system or within the broader legal sphere. Students with disabilities regularly encounter barriers related to lack of information about the relevant law and process. This problem was clearest in the cases relating to the doctrine of timeliness and those establishing a lack of connection between disability and the accommodations request. What can be learned from the legal barriers cases is that we need a way to make sure that complaint mechanisms exist within the university, that their steps are clear, and that they are explained to students who may use them. Ontario is the only province to date that has developed recommendations for a post-secondary education standard. The final recommendations for the standard were released in April 2022. Under the governing legislation, which is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, recommendations are released after going through public consultation and modification. They then become binding after ministerial approval. While the concrete recommendations are numerous and wide-ranging, some of the most innovative recommendations of the Education Standard Development Committee involve instituting metrics to measure progress on accessibility, measuring and improving campus climate, and making inclusive and accessible pedagogy an evaluative criterion for teaching awards and research grants. Others include requiring student unions to support student access and participation in non-academic campus life by funding accessibility supports such as sign language interpreters and attendance services. Educators, librarians, and members of the leadership at post-secondary institutions are also to receive training every 3 years on their obligations under human rights law and the standards, and on best practices for developing curricula based on universal design, as well as accommodations. Particularly innovative is the explicit recognition of intersectionality in the standards that were proposed. The committee stated that it placed the needs and lived experience of students with disabilities and intersecting identities at the forefront of its work. It emphasized that disability is part of diversity and intersectionality, and that it is important to recognize the compounded impact of intersecting identities. They require that every post-secondary institution set up an accessibility advisory committee with a chair who has knowledge of intersectionality and disability, and who preferably has lived experience of disability. Overall, accessibility legislation offers an important opportunity for provincial governments and post-secondary institutions to ensure that students with disabilities receive an educational experience that fulfills students' needs in a holistic way. So how are things going with respect to post-secondary education and the standards? Well, the Ontario government has unfortunately not yet approved the standards. The standards have been left in a state of limbo for about 2 years. Some Ontario universities have done a considerable amount of work still to implement the substance of the standards. The approach that they are taking, I think, fits quite well with the theory that I've termed disability equality as an ethical project of inclusion. So, what is disability equality as an ethical project of inclusion? Let me say from the outset that by ethics, I do not mean relying on the ethical leanings of those who are at the table in any given law reform initiative. The project is much more structured and rigorous an exercise, and relies less on circumstantial situations. There are 3 broad pillars to this conceptual approach. First, disability inclusion should form the overarching goal and the leading light, really, in our efforts to improve disability equality. These efforts may be initiated by disability advocates, or they may be initiated by governments, such as the creation of legislation and processes for creating and implementing accessibility standards. The second pillar is that legislative directions and rebuttable presumptions favoring disability equality should be used where possible. And I'll just say 2 things about this. The first is that with respect to legislative directions, These directions may be inserted in statutes and, if created properly, would assist with the interpretation of the statute in ways that further disability inclusion. Secondly, rebuttable presumptions can also be helpful. They may be used in contexts such as human rights adjudication for situations where persons with disabilities have traditionally experienced procedural disadvantage in making their case. For example, by not having access to as much information about a service provider's internal workings, but yet having to show that their disability was an element in the service provider's adverse decision that affects them. The third broad pillar deals with the roles and responsibilities of those involved in any project designed to advance disability equality. I say this often in the context of administrative justice, that those who are at the helm of an initiative have a responsibility to promote and further the disability equality projects that their team undertakes. More importantly, they also have a responsibility to develop an appropriate organizational culture, one that seeks to further disability access prosperity. Moreover, everyone in the team has a responsibility to make sure the project is successful. Bringing these ideas to the case studies that I discussed this evening, I'll say that rebuttable presumptions may assist litigants to show that they have a prima facie case, a case on its face of discrimination, and may help us to have more decisions in the jurisprudence addressing disability discrimination and providing effective legal guidance. If an understanding that one of the purposes of human rights legislation is to undertake a project of disability inclusion, then this understanding should inform statutory interpretation and will hopefully prompt adjudicators to consider results that they reach in light of this overall goal. Legislative guidance would also be helpful. In Ontario, for example, where the Accessibility Standard Development Committees are given terms of reference that require them to reach consensus, we see a situation where consensus conceives of the process of developing standards as a competitive battleground. An ethical project of inclusion, by contrast, would understand the development of standards as working towards a common goal, that of disability inclusion and disability access prosperity. So with this, I conclude my remarks with thanks. Thank you for your attention and for the honor of having me deliver this evening's keynote address. I look forward to your questions and to your comments.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jacobs, for that address. I know I have lots buzzing in my mind. I imagine others do as well. So as we shift into the Q&A period of the evening, inspired by, in part, by Dr. Eve Tuck's Indigenous Feminist approach to Q&A facilitation, what I'm actually going to invite you to do is to take a few minutes just to speak or to share with the person next to you or near you, and perhaps either one thing that you learned and or a question that you have. And so we'll just take a few moments to do that and to connect and to talk with each other. We'll also give Dr. Jacobs a moment just to take a breath, get some water, and then we'll open it up for some dialogue. So take some time to connect with those around you.
Okay, so start kind of wrapping up your thoughts and sharing, and we'll come back to each other as a large group. Okay, it was so nice to hear everyone connecting and speaking with each other. So yeah, we'll open it up for questions. Just one thing that I was really struck by, something that you shared, Dr. Jacobs, was this idea of people with disabilities are looking for more than what is offered. I think that's just such an important reflection, and really thinking about what is often offered as the bare minimum, if that, and what it means to really reimagine what we offer and what we create together in and out of our institutions. So we'd love to hear some of the questions and reflections in the room. We have 2 mics in the middle aisle here, and our colleague Tamaya is also able to support bringing a mic to you. But yeah, does anyone have a question that they want to start? I'm not sure. I don't want to call her name just in case she knows it. Yes, please. You can hit your mic.
So, my comment.
Hold on, the mic's not on, we'll just turn it on.
Is it on now? Yes. Okay. So my comment after reflecting on your talk isn't about transportation and it isn't about education either, but it's about the general injustice faced by people with disabilities. I do communications for Disability Without Poverty, and I find it just terrible that there's so much legislative poverty across this country. And just to give you an example, parents of an adult child or a child with disabilities, they don't dare to put their child on their will, because if they do, and the child gets a landfall amount of money or they inherit real estate, then there goes all their social benefits. And it's not just money, it might be equipment, it might be a subsidy for catheters, it might be, why is this and how can we address this? And is that grounds for launching an investigation at the UNCRPP?
That is a wonderful question, or set of questions. Thank you so much. And I agree with you. I mean, in terms of the clawbacks, the challenges of amassing any kind of income and wealth and honestly security. So you asked a couple of questions. One is whether or not this is something that could be brought as an inquiry with the CRPD. I can't answer directly, but what I can say is that if there is enough evidence to show that there is an impact on persons with disabilities, showing systemic evidence of how this is being done, etc., it is possible to have an inquiry put in place by the committee. It's a matter of, I know you're with Disability with Poverty, it might be a matter of working with other NGOs, but it's a matter of establishing that there is some sort of systemic issue occurring. Where does this come from? This is one of the questions you asked as well, the second question. And I think that historically it comes from the idea of persons with disabilities being seen as needing of charity. It ties in with notions of who is the meritorious poor, the worthy poor. These are all stereotypes and stigmas that have traveled forward in time, and continue to this day. And so, yes, we need to, I think, take stock of where these issues are coming from, the impact that they're having on the disability community, and try to unroot these issues in addressing essentially questions about adequate social protection and income security. So thanks.
Thank you so much. I came here and, I got more than I expected, especially from you, because I am writing a thesis on this regarding disability and my own experience. And what I would ask you is that I would like to know to what extent people with disabilities are participating. I think there needs to be done a lot. And there's like a training of people who work with these people, especially if you have invisible disability, like me. Well, now you can see it's visible. But I sustained an injury, I had an injury in the knee bar. And so those are the two questions, and I really appreciate your talk and your work. And I would like to see personally more, engagement, more empowerment for people with disabilities, especially in education.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question and the comments. And yeah, I mean, they're so important in telling, and I think central in today's disability global rights movement and the local movement as well. So your first question is, to what extent are persons with disabilities participating? And I'll say something that's, I think, kind of, I don't think people always pick up on this, and I think it's really an important point, that within the CRPD, when they talk about participation of organizations, they actually are talking about, when you look through carefully, the convention is talking about the participation of organizations of persons with disabilities that are representative. And once you recognize that, you realize that there's a bit of a limitation on who is participating, right? So Canada, for example, has signed and ratified the convention, but when we talk about participation here domestically, I think we're talking about something broader. We're talking about persons with disabilities. If you look at statutory contexts and other contexts where persons with disabilities engage, it's not limited to those who are with representative organizations or organizations at all. But as a practical matter, are people with disabilities participating, especially in training? This is something that I think comes up repeatedly and perpetually at the CRPD. I think the committee is always asking whether, and to what extent, people with disabilities are sharing their perspectives, because it is about, the perspectives of persons with disabilities. If we're going to be making any change, those are the voices we need to hear. So I think that across the board, there are gaps in terms of people with disabilities not participating to the fullest extent. How can we improve that? How can we lead to greater empowerment of persons with disabilities? I mean, I think you're right that you mentioned training. I think we need to make sure that there's training for persons with disabilities to know how to engage in these opportunities. I think it's also incumbent on, those of us who have the venues or fora where participation can take place to share information about that. And so, as a member of the CRPD, I give talks about the CRPD as well, and I try to, highlight the importance of bringing matters to the CRPD or how it can be done and things like that. But I think that domestic governments need to do that as well. So how do you consult in, let's say the review of a standard or a proposed standard? How do you get in, and be invited to, we've had a number of parliamentary committee hearings over the summer, for example, on various issues relating to persons with disabilities. How do you get your name to the Senate so you can be heard? These are all things that I think as a disability community we need to know, we need to share. So thank you.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Can you explain, sorry, maybe, I think I'd ask you to repeat something you explained already, but can you explain something that you hope someone who's not informed of your work, just more about the context of the work and what you hope, some things you imagine doing the next steps of your work and how you'll organize yours.
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. So, explain something from my work that I hope would get, I guess, and explain the next steps of my work. So, in terms of what I hope that people would take away from my work, I think that the idea of fostering disability inclusion, and that we need to make that more of a polar star, is one thing that I would hope people would take away. So instead of, sometimes as lawyers, for example, we follow paths, we follow challenges within a statutory framework or a doctrinal analysis. But the bigger picture of how this is going to work in terms of disability inclusion, and making sure that persons with disabilities are treated equally, and in a sense, in a way that matters to them, that's lost. And so I would hope that kind of understanding could be a takeaway, and the different contexts where it might be done. So it might be done more easily, for example, in the statutory context and adjudicative, but I think both are possible. As for next steps for my work, one thing that I've really gained, I believe, from being on the CRPD committee is the opportunity to hear about how other countries are engaging with persons with disabilities, things that are positive, things that are negative. And I think it would be interesting to bring back some of those ideas, to see how we might do things differently in some cases. So that's one thing. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Hello? Hi, Dr. Jacobs. Thank you very much for your talk this evening. And I wanted to ask you a question. If you see disability justice as a separate project to inclusion, or do you see it as part of inclusion? And if so, what are your thoughts on how it will be realized in post-secondary?
Okay, so we have some slipping microphones. Yes, thank you so much. That's a great question. So whether I see disability justice as part of the project of inclusion, or whether it's something separate. I think the disability justice framework set up by Sims Invalid, etc., is very deep, very rich, right? There are so many ideas that are within it. Ideas about accessibility, ideas about care, ideas about capitalism. I think that it's a very broad framework, and certainly I think that it can intersect with the disability equality as a project, an ethical project of inclusion. But at the same time, I think it's important to keep in mind that the disability equality as a project, an ethical project of inclusion, is somewhat narrower in scope. So I'm focusing on disability equality where it's defined in the way that is used through the human rights model of disability, right? So that's one thing. And whereas broader ideas about the impact of capitalism, the importance of I'm just trying to think of some of the other things that are in the disability justice list, but there are many different things that are there. While those are important, I think that we have to find the places where they fit, so they won't all fit in every circumstance. So, yeah. So I guess to sum up, I see disability justice is quite broad with excellent ideas and, definitely worthwhile reviewing. But disability equality as a project, as an ethical project of inclusion, is a bit narrower in scope and focuses, I think, the best way of saying it is focuses on particular circumstances, case by case, and we need to draw from disability justice in a way that's helpful or useful for the case.
Hi. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs, for this wonderful, non-inspirational talk. Very pragmatic way to exhibit how we can look into the realization of rights. My name is Kate Kushik, I'm a professor here at the School of Physical and Occupational Therapy. And so my question, what I grapple with is like when we are dealing with disability rights, and I work with the civil society organizations here in Canada and looking at implementation in the long run. But when we talk to families, and I work with children with disabilities in particular, but the civil society in general, people continue not seeing implementation happening on the ground, or having the same issues historically, right? So Canada is going for report now in March again for the second report. And we have seen advances in policy and documents, but how can we see or help?
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm going to pause you for access.
Super fast,
Can you
yes.
slow down a little bit
I
and then
can.
restart your question?
I can, I'm sorry. This has happened every time. My apologies, I was, okay, let's go again. So the question is, I'll simplify too, sorry. How can we help families, persons with disabilities, civil society organizations in accessing the CRPD, but also understanding how those rights and legislation that is happening can be accessed in real life or on the ground, and contribute for this communication between research, policy, and people living with disabilities.
Thank you, Keiko. Great question. So, how can we help families essentially realize their CRPD rights on the ground, day to day? One thing that I always say is that the CRPD, the rights under the CRPD, they're kind of like a stream. So they're there, they're constantly flowing. I think it's a matter of us as disability advocates, scholars, etc., to dip into that stream when we need to, right? So I think that families, we can bring out the rights that are relevant. So let's say it's Article 19, living independently in the community. We can bring out those rights. We can use that language. We can use the general comments when we're doing various things, whether it's writing reports to a community organization that deals with, Article 19 rights. So, an agency might be responsible for ensuring that there's adequate personal assistance, let's say, in the home. We can use the language when we're dissatisfied with what's occurred. We can use the general comments. We can use we can use all of that to help put forward our arguments. One thing that's really interesting about Canada and the CRPD is that you see advocates and lawyers actually using the language of the CRPD in domestic, litigation. You don't see that in every country, and so, I think it's helpful because it gets the language out there, it changes the dialogue, it changes what our expectations are, and it's based in law and in a convention that, our country has ratified. So I think it's a matter of dipping into the stream and using the language and tools and concepts over there.
Other questions?
invisible disability has been named in this space. And I can see this parallel, and I'm wondering, like, how do we get to a better reality in which, like, people wouldn't have to opt for this choice if they happen to have it, like, not opt for not disclosing this part of who they are as persons? Like, how do we, as a collective, get to a place where people don't have to think a million times before, like, just like disclosing this in the workplace or like in any other sphere where they can have like serious, like, negative consequences for doing so. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful question. I think you definitely hit the nail on the head in terms of a difficult reality, and thinking about pathways that we can create so that we can avoid having to essentially cause harm to persons with disabilities in order to explain needs or supports that are needed. And I think one way of addressing this is to focus on the supports and needs themselves, right? So instead of having discussions about what medical impairments a person has or what the different limitations are, it might be useful to kind of reorient those discussions so that they're focused on what the supports are that a person needs, right? That information is information that can travel, right? So if you say that to, for example, your employer in one context, it could move to, your next job without having to disclose all of your personal information, medical personal information. That's one idea that I have in mind that comes to my mind rather quickly. I imagine there are other ways of doing it as well, but even getting to that point of sharing supports as opposed to medical impairments, I think will take some time, and it'll take a lot of changing of mindsets, right? There are a lot of people probably outside of this room, right? But there are a lot of people who really do see disability as something that's not so much about barriers in society, but pretty much all about medical issues.
Hello? First of all, thank you very much. This was extremely informative. I was just wondering, as a second-year law student and somebody who's just getting into learning about disability and the law, I feel like a huge frustration that perhaps many of us feel is that changes in the law, by nature of being so slow and incremental, can be very frustrating in the sense that there's a lot of immediate change that needs to be done, but it just seems like processes take so long. And learning on a case-by-case basis as well can be such a reactive mechanism that it's difficult to envision how quickly we can move forward in necessary discussions. I was just wondering if you have suggestions for other means for direct action that we can work on alongside these legislative solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. So yes, I agree with you. The common law is known to be incremental in affecting change, waiting for decisions. That's part of what I was discussing in the talk even today. We don't have a lot of guidance in some cases because there just aren't enough cases or completed decisions. Other means, the standard setting and legislation purports to be another means, another way of addressing these issues more proactively instead of waiting for complaints to be brought forward. So that's one possibility, but as I discussed as well, some of the challenges that arise there, one of the main ones is that it relies quite a bit on government discretion. And so if government is not, for example, making strides to have proposed standards approved by the minister so that they can be put in place, that will continue to slow us down, and it's harder, I think, to push government to do things in the policy realm. As we know, public law doesn't really allow us to force the government to create policy. What else can we do outside of those two? Well, I think, and maybe this actually goes back a bit to the disability justice movement. Part of that disability justice theory talks about how persons with disabilities work together and rely on each other. The downside is it tends to be informal, but the positive side is that it may be a way to get some change or to affect change through the community. Unfortunately, none of those solutions are ideal, but there are some ways some paths that might be taken. I don't know of anyone who's come up with, the answer. I wish I had the answer. I could share it with you, but this is unfortunately the reality at the moment.
I love you on top tonight, and Vinny, when you always graduate, I'm wondering what it is we are, Vinny, doing God. How can you fight government against the right to die? I want heading down and what we know the way the world
Thank you for the question, Adam. So the question essentially, and let me know if I've missed anything, but wondering what role perhaps the CRPD can play in relation to what's happening right now around essentially the right to assisted death and the right to die, particularly in the Quebec context, and particularly in the Western world, and in that context, and just what does regulation look like? Oh, did they have any teeth in terms of intervening? As
the
Absolutely. And so he's just clarifying, like, he's not against people's individual rights to make the choice, but what does it mean when that is essentially being proposed as a solution because of essentially disabled people being seen as burdens?
Thank you very much for the question, Adam. I mean, these are such significant issues. The medical assistance in dying issue is, I think, one of the biggest issues of our time, here in Canada especially. So, one of your questions is what role the CRPD can play with respect to MAID, and whether the CRPD can intervene. So the CRPD is not in a position to intervene simply because it's designed to be a decision-making body, or a body that is more of an arbiter type than it is an advocacy type body. Right now, with medical assistance in dying, we're looking at questions of whether individuals who experience mental illness solely should be able to have medical assistance in dying, what parameters, if any, should be put in place. This is, in terms of how that might be addressed on a domestic level. Yeah, I mean, we've seen a number of people put forward, myself included, put forward information and arguments about the difficulties of MAID. And I think that this is one of those situations where, the battle will continue in terms of legislative reform and legislative approaches. Maybe there will be another court challenge. I'm not sure. I don't know, but it doesn't. Yeah, it's we don't know, but yeah. I mean, so the CRPD can't play a role of intervention. However, it could. I'm never involved with anything dealing with Canada before the CRPD. We don't sit on anything relating to our country as nationals. But, it could be something that is flagged during the country review. The next review is actually in March. It could be something that's flagged. There is at least one decision from the CRPD dealing with assisted dying, that could be helpful. But the important thing that the CRPD can do when country reports and country reviews are coming up is to, indicate to a state party what why something is inappropriate or contrary to the convention and what needs to be done. And so what's really helpful to the committee in situations of, any, controversial issues of this nature is to have shadow reports from, organizations of persons with disabilities and individuals, academics, etc., outlining what the issues are and how the convention has been contravened. So, so in terms of what can be done, I think that would be probably the clearest route.
Thank you so much again to Dr. Jacobs for, of course, the incredible keynote, and it's just been really nice. I feel like we often don't have time for a nice fulfilling Q&A, so it was really wonderful to hear from so many of you. So let's give another kind of round of applause, another wave of applause. So wonderful. So again, thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague for some closing words, but I'm just so happy and proud to introduce you. Kind of heard her name throughout the evening. She doesn't always love this, but I really just want to take a moment to thank Catherine, who is our accessibility advisor and truly is the main reason why we're here today making history. The work that she has done at this institution in quite a short period of time is pretty incredible. She is, just so tenacious, brilliant, hilarious. She makes us laugh all of the time, and she brings just such passion to her work and creates spaces for learning. And so I'm just so honored to welcome her and to thank her for all of the work that she's done here at McGill.
Thank you, Shanice. Wow. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to try to not do that too fast. So, as we come to a close of this wonderful gathering in celebration of the United Nations International Day of Persons with Disabilities, I want to thank each of you for being here today. Your presence affirms the importance of the conversations we've had, the ideas we've exchanged, and the connections that we've strengthened tonight. Our theme this year, Disability Pride, has encouraged us to embrace disability as an integral part of identity, something to value and to celebrate, not to hide or to overcome. Tonight, we've heard from Dr. Laverne Jacobs, whose powerful keynote and a wonderful Q&A session reminded us that disability equality is not just a matter of legal frameworks, but an ethical commitment to building truly inclusive spaces. Her insights challenge us to think about accessibility not as an add-on, but as a foundational principle of our communities, including here at McGill University. For me, Disability Pride is also about acknowledging that the barriers people face are not inherent to disability, but are created by the systems and environments we inhabit. Events like this one help us collectively dismantle those barriers by fostering understanding, empathy, and most importantly, action. As McGill's accessibility advisor, I see this work in motion every day, from the efforts to make our physical spaces more accessible, to advocating for inclusive policies, to supporting students, faculty, and staff in their journeys. I'm incredibly proud of the progress we've made as a university in the last 3 years at least, but I know there's still much more that we can do. I want to take a moment to thank the people who made this evening possible, so bear with me. Our amazing keynote speaker, Dr. Laverne Jacobs, for her thought-provoking and inspiring words. Elder Michael Loft, thank you. Provo and Executive Vice President Academic Christopher Manfredi. The Faculty of Law for their support for this event tonight, and the Dean of Law, Robert Leckie. Paul Chuma, our facilitator for this afternoon's creative writing workshop on Disability Pride, which was amazing. Sylvie Bamari, I hope I'm not saying that wrong, Associate Director of Internal Communications in the Communications and Institutional Relations. Danielle Murrell-Cox and Jonia Miller for the beautiful artwork that went into our posters that I'm so proud of. Our ASL interpreters, thank you, and our live captioner, thank you for your patience and your determination in bringing this, making this event more accessible. I also want to thank the organizing committee, Shanice Yard, Andy Clegg, Antoinette Henry, Darcy Thing, and Tamaya Savage, and also all our volunteers who work tirelessly behind the scenes to bring this event to life. And all of you for your support and engagement today. This day is more than just a celebration. It's a call to action. Let's continue the work together to create a McGill community and a broader society that values and embraces diversity in all of its forms. Let's ensure that disability pride is not confined to a single day, but woven into the fabric of everything we do every day. The late and great Stella Young, Australian journalist, comedian, and disability rights activist, imparted a deep truth to us many years ago. Stella told us that you get proud by practicing. This is possibly the most important thing anyone will ever tell you. The journey towards disability pride is long and hard, and you have to practice every single day. At McGill, we've been practicing. Through the initiatives we've undertaken this year and the conversations we've sparked, most notably through our work to develop an institution-wide accessibility strategy, we've moved closer to becoming the accessible, inclusive community we aspire to be. But, as Stella reminds us, this journey doesn't end. It requires ongoing practice, reflection, and dedication. Together, we must continue to challenge assumptions, dismantle barriers, and build a culture where disability pride and disability justice are our shared values and lived experience. As I leave you tonight, I encourage you to reflect on how you can contribute to this ongoing journey, whether it's advocating for accessibility in your own spaces, challenging assumptions about disability, or simply listening more closely to the experiences of others. Every action counts. Thank you again for being part of this event. Together, we are making a difference. Have a wonderful evening and safe travels home. Thank you.
Everybody, have a great night.